We do, but don't drive a McLaren. They're terrible. They break after 2 times. You know, my oil pump went out in the Lamborghini at 12,000 miles. It cost $8,000 to fix it. Don't tell me about breaking cars, you bastard. The Italians, we make it a good car. Una macchina, kind of like a bicicletta, you know, kind of, no, cozy. But you gotta love it. I actually got that because I worked for Polymath. I did Polymesh, and they paid me a consultancy, and I said, well, I'll get a Lamborghini with it. It was my one superfluous expense. I drive nothing but Cadillacs and trucks. And I said, well, I've always wanted to have one of these. And so I was in a position where I had these tokens, these other things. And I said, fuck it, let's do it. So you can thank Poly for the Lambi. Non parlo l'italiano. Mi piace l'Italia. Mi amo. Che bello. Favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger film? Oh my God, that is the hardest question I think anybody's ever asked me. I think probably Predator was the most complete of all the Schwarzenegger films. It's standalone. It's just fucking timeless. You can watch it today. It's just as good as the day it came out. I mean, everybody says Terminator 2 was like the high point. And there's a lot of great stuff in his career, but that or Total Recall were both great. See you at the party, Hauser. He throws the arms. Oh my God. Oh, that was so good. What was the first car you ever owned? Dirt poor. I had a Ford Taurus. Old clunky Taurus. LP610 Spider. Oh, this guy. No, you know, I've seen this guy. He's like all over the comments section. He's all over Twitter. Besides being like part of the paint chip brigade, he can't even get his lies right. We did a public disclosure about how much ADA we hold. It's 2.4 billion. He claims there's 5 billion. And we received that ADA as compensation as part of the development contract to build Cardano. The valuation of the ADA at the time it was given was $6 million. Very small amount relative to a 5-year development agreement for a large team, in addition to the Bitcoin fiat received. But this guy keeps going every channel, every time, says the same lie, says the same lie, says the same lie, and so forth. I think it was the person that reached out to me over Telegram and told me I needed to burn, for some reason, all of the ADA that my organization holds because it's not fair. I told him he was an idiot, and then banned him, blocked him on Telegram. And then after that moment, every single AMA and YouTube video I make, he comments on it and also goes to Twitter and CCs the SEC and posts screen captures of me calling him an idiot for telling me to destroy my own money of my company that was earned for commercial services performed. This is an example of a bad person. Just a bad person, a misguided, stupid, bad person who holds a grudge and vendetta because he didn't get his way. And that's what they do. I'm a bad guy because I'm successful. Dude, I've been in Bitcoin for a very long time. I've been in the crypto space for a very long time. The 3 projects, BitShares, Ethereum, Cardano, that I created collectively hold a market value above $80 billion. And that's just the projects I created, not the work I did in Bitcoin or the Bitcoin I received back when a Bitcoin was $1. Think for your fucking self. I'm a successful entrepreneur. And I've been in a very successful industry, the most successful industry in the last 10 years in human history. And that's called being successful. You're not. You're a fucking loser who just shows up and just rants again and again and again and again and again, trying to piggyback on other people's success. And I really don't appreciate the things that you do. This is my I opened up the AMA. It's a good way to bookend what we're talking about. It's the longest AMA I've ever done. Fitting way to end 2020. I talked about empathy, understanding people, knowing their motivation, where they come from, what they do. And actions speak far louder than words. Everybody can tell you how honest they are, how great they are, how big their dick is. But at the end of the day, I follow the Paul Halmos way of doing things. Paul Halmos was a famous mathematician, and he was a great mathematician, but he was a better writer. And he followed something called the inductive writing method. So he'd write the first chapter, then he'd write the second chapter, go back and rewrite the first chapter. Then he'd write the third chapter, and then go back and rewrite the first and second chapter, and so forth. So it took him a really long time to write a book. They'd all be very small. The first chapter would be fucking phenomenal. Last chapter would be incomprehensible. But he had this great method. He said, tell them what you're going to do it, and tell them what you did. That's math. And Halmos was just a genius in that respect, this great Hungarian mathematician. I really admired him. I never had a real chance to meet him. He died a little bit earlier, before I had a chance to get too big into math. And I always wanted to, because I so admired the way he wrote and thought. And so when we look at cryptocurrencies, it's like, tell them what you're going to do. We're going to build Cardano. Okay. So some people took the risk, and we went and did it. A lot of people, actually. 9,914 in Japan, Korea, and other places in Asia, and 3 core entities that work really hard. And then we did it. We built Cardano, and we released it in September of 2017. And then we kept working on it. Hundreds of updates throughout the last 4 years. And we got it to a point where 1,200 stake pool operators are here, million lines of code, 91 academic papers, hundreds of thousands of community members, listed on 30 plus exchanges. There's tons of success there, and a beautiful roadmap for how that we can match or exceed every single cryptocurrency in market. We know how to do it, and it's a for inevitability in terms of capabilities. And we did this in a very uncertain environment. We did this in an environment with a million problems. We had issues with the Cardano Foundation, with Michael Parsons. We had product managers that didn't work out, project managers that didn't work out. We chose the worst language you could choose to build this thing in, Haskell. We somehow survived. We had to build up the language itself. And then the Haskell community, some members of it, attacked us for bizarre reasons, like, oh, crypto is using Haskell for reputation laundering. Let's write blog posts about it. Meanwhile, we're investing millions of dollars to make Haskell work on WebAssembly and JavaScript, and funding the Haskell Foundation and other such things. It's been a hell of a journey, and we did it. We got it over the line. This was our year. Shelley shipped. No one thought it was going to. It did. It was the hardest single launch in the history of our industry. We went from a static and federated system to a dynamic and decentralized system. And now we're in the tell them what you did phase, because there's a gap between what's actually in market and what people perceive to be in market. So we have to spend a big chunk of 2021 just telling people about what Cardano is, because it's a Leviathan. It was built to last. And that was 5 years of my life, the hardest 5 years I've ever had in my life. And I didn't have to spend these years this way. I could have just rested on my laurels, and I could have easily just gone off to the mountaintop and not really worked. So I'd already reached enough success by the time I launched Cardano that life was going to be pretty easy for me no matter what. I chose to spend half a decade of running around the world, going to 52 countries, running a company, building all of this, because I legitimately felt that the things that we were building could make a difference in the world. And what happens is that when you do these things, it creates a beacon for some people to just go out there and beat the hell out of you. And it used to bother me. It really did. It used to just eat the fuck away from me, and I'd just be like, God, who are these people? But now it makes me sad. I just feel pity, because I think, God, This person lives in a world that's so small that no matter how much evidence you give them or what you show them or what you've accomplished, what you've built, what you can do with what you've built, they still believe what they believe. And it's just like dealing with a flat earther. It's like dealing with somebody who thinks the earth is 6,000 years old. You just can't convince those people. You can't get them over the line. You really just can't push them in that direction. And you feel so much pity because at the end of the day, their lives are terrible because of that perspective. They never achieve great success. They never get respect from their peers. They never get a good life, which is why they got the chip on their shoulder and the victim complex and the anger. They feel like they've gotten a bad shake and they feel like the world's against them, but they don't have the emotional intelligence or skills to admit the reason why they didn't get a fair shake is because they burnt themselves to the ground. It's like seeing an addict or an alcoholic who can't admit that they're an alcoholic, or any of these people laden with problems, and they can't admit that they have problems. So that's, I guess, the bookend of all of it. It's in a year in closing 2020, it's been a very hard year for all of us. And what taught me, especially watching all the tragedy, like I remember when the markets completely collapsed and there was blood in the streets and everybody was panicking. And I went out there and I said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I quoted FDR, I think, in that video. It's in my office, and I didn't have a single concern. I said, you know what? We've been through this before. We will recover. We will prevail. We will get through all of it. And sure enough, we did. The world got better. Things got better. Hope came. It's clear that this is ephemeral. Most tragedies are. But what it did lead me is that we need to be more empathetic. We need to care about each other more. We need to understand other people's perspectives. I honestly do try to understand these critics' perspectives. Like, I get Max Kaiser and Tone Vase because I know what makes them money. They do and say the things that they do and say because that's their business model. It's the same for Chico Crypto. That's his business model. And he scaled it down a little bit because of litigation, but at the end of the day, it's still his business model, and that's how he exists. That's what he does. And that's how he gets clicks. Okay. So I understand that, and I don't take it personally. What makes me profoundly sad is when people have these perspectives that hurt themselves or hurt others, and there's no reason to have that perspective, and it's impossible to convince them otherwise. That person who posted that, I am sure in his mind, 100% believes I'm a con man and scammer who's trying to hurt people in this industry. And that Cardano is not real, it has no real value, and it's a bad thing for everybody. You can spend the next 10 years putting paper, putting progress, putting partnerships and things in front of that person, and he'll set it on fire because there's nothing that you can show him to convince him otherwise. That's just who he is. It's his perspective on life. It's the same with the anti-vaxxers or these other people. They just think they're right. And you just can't have a conversation. You can't connect because they've defeated themselves. And that's the biggest challenge, I think, that we have to overcome in the coming years. That empathy gap and the inability for us to have conversations anymore. It's getting much, 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 much worse. Now there are so many people on the political spectrum, the religious spectrum, the scientific or anti-science spectrum, the crypto spectrum, who are incapable of evolving and growing and listening and learning and being able to adapt and change to new ideas. It's impossible. Donald Trump lost the election, guys. It happened. You might believe it's because of fraud or not fraud. Who knows? But he lost. And Joe Biden will be president of the United States. This should not be a controversial statement. Just should not. It's a reality. It's a fact. We live in it. And in 20 days' time, it will be validated. Every single time I've mentioned this in a video, I've had people sincerely post comments saying, you are wrong. Just you wait and see. Biden will never be president. And they believe it. They would literally give all their money, put it on black. They'd bet on it because they believe it with that much sincerity. And then when it happens on the 20th, and Biden's president, he's being sworn in, it's going to be like this catastrophic cognitive dissonance. And then they'll have to construct some elaborate mental construction. The Catholic Church actually ran into this. When Pope Benedict stepped down, the fundamentalist Catholics in the Catholic Church said a pope cannot resign. So when Pope Francis came in, they said he is the illegitimate pope. Only Pope Benedict is legitimate until he dies. Francis cannot be pope. You can't say anything to convince them otherwise. Even Benedict, the Pope, who's infallible, says, I am no longer the Pope. He is the Pope. I am the Pope Emeritus. They still believe Benedict is the Pope, these fundamentalist people, Catholic Church. And same thing will happen here. So I don't know how to solve that. And all I know is there's an empathy gap, and people have a lack of understanding and lack of appreciation for evidence. And that's going to be the great challenge of my generation and our time, is how do we as a society overcome it? Because it is getting worse. The divisions are getting worse. People are starting to hate each other. People are starting to excommunicate each other. I have a cousin who married, or I guess is in a serious relationship with a gender studies PhD. And she's just off her rocker. And apparently she's made a mandate that he's not allowed to see my uncle and aunt, his family. They're super tight, his family and him. And he can't see his family because she says she doesn't feel safe around them because they don't accept her for her lifestyle or studies or whatever the hell it is. I just can't imagine that, having this bizarro perspective on things where because people disagree with your field of study or the things that you do, you have to take it to a level where you tell a person's son, you can no longer see your father or mother or other family members for the rest of your life. And that's happening. It's now happened to my extended family. It's happened to a lot of other families. This woke cult is destroying people. And if you try to go and reason with this person and say, do you think that's appropriate? You talk about harm and microaggressions and psychological trauma. What type of psychological trauma are you inflicting on him by denying him his family that he's loved for 30 plus years? Over the head. It's the world we live in. And that is the great challenge of our time, is how do we overcome that? How do we bridge those gaps? How do we get people to understand each other? I have strong disagreements with Eos and Tezos. I've been very vocal about that, as I do Vitalik and these other guys. But you know what? I don't delight in their suffering. And I applaud them when they do great things. For example, when Ethereum 2 launched, I said, congratulations, Vitalik. That's the world we should live in. That's the world I'd like to live in. And let's make 2021 the world that makes that happen. All right, everybody. It's the longest AMA I've ever done. Almost 4 hours straight of me talking. How about that? I went from like 8 p.m. to 12 p.m. I went to midnight. Pretty crazy. Happy New Year. Let's all have a much better year than the year that came before. Cheers.